Russia, there was World War One, and World War One ended in 1918. It was 1914 to 1918. And around the same time, 1917, the Russian people revolted against the Tsar. The Tsar was the king. The Tsar was the name, but it was the king. And they didn't like the king, the Tsar, what he was doing. So they were revolting, and they won. They got rid of the Tsar and his family. And there were two sides in that conflict. There were the Reds and the Whites, the White Russians and the Red Russians. The Red Russians were the communists. The White Russians were the ones that believed differently, wanted democracy, that kind of thing. The Reds won, and what they did, they went throughout all the villages in Russia, and they asked in the villages, what side did you fight on during the revolution? If anybody in that village fought for the White Russians, then the people were killed, as well as the village sustained a lot of, like a pogrom. A pogrom is when they killed all the people. So what happened is Zadie's grandfather, who had fought for the White Russians, had to get out of town, to get away. He took the entire family, because they lived in a small town, and the risk of them being killed was great. And he took them across Russia to the furthest most eastern port, which was called Vladivostok. Vladvi, Vladivostok. And he brought the entire family, including this uncle I told you about, who is the subject of the letters hanging in your living room. They got there, they got to the Vladivostok. Zadie's father was born in Vladivostok. And he was 3 years old when he came into China. He went to a town, he didn't really go into China, he went into Outer Mongolia. Outer Mongolia had a town called Harbin. And a lot of people running away, a lot of Russians running away, had to get out of Russia. They ended up being in Harbin. Most of them were Jewish. There was a population of about 20,000 Jews living there. They're called expats, expatriates. They had been patriots of Russia, and now they're no longer patriots of Russia. You call them expats. Anytime anybody moves from one country to another and settles there, they're called expats, expatriates. So Zadie's father was born in Vladivostok. His family came into Outer Mongolia. And then when Zadie's father was maybe 6 years old, he moved to Shanghai because Zadie's mother had a sister living in Shanghai, and her sister was married to this guy. So somehow or other, there was some connection. Anyway, this guy had not been able to be a conductor when he lived in Moscow because he was Jewish, and everything was, there was so much anti-Semitism there. So another reason for these people to get out, in addition to fight for the White Russians, was the anti-Semitism and the pogroms. So this guy came to Shanghai. He became a conductor. He was very well known. The letters on your wall in your living room are letters that were sent to him, and I don't know why they're written in English, unless that was becoming an international language. But they're written in English, and they congratulate him on being 25 years, I believe, if I remember correctly, as conductor of the orchestra. Cool, so those are the letters. So when I found the letters, Bobby framed them. So I bought the gold frames, because in China, gold is a very important color. It's a royal color. And red is a very important color. Actually, Chinese fries wear red, because it's such an important color, as well as purple being a royal color, but red is. So I got red velvet matting, and I framed them in gold and red, because those are the colors of China.
And so the conductor, he married the most beautiful woman in all of China, and her name was Helene Schlotsky, and she was the first ever beauty pageant winner of the Miss Shanghai contest. And so we have her trophy in our living room. Zadie got that years ago, like 20 or 30 years ago. She moved. So I guess she divorced the conductor?
She was the conductor's child.
Oh, not his wife. Got it. I made a mistake.
Not his
Okay.
wife. She was born in China because they were afraid. Chinese, for the most part, are not anti-Semitic. It's one of the few countries. But because of the history of what had happened in Russia, they sent her to Catholic schools. And she grew up Catholic. And at 16, she won the Miss Shanghai contest. Her husband was a guy who had met her and fell in love with her. He was a rubber merchant from wherever rubber grows, I don't remember. And so, you want to sit here? Come sit here. He was a rubber businessman. And so she married him, and she went to live there on the rubber plantation, and his parents lived nearby. He didn't come home at nights. He was out every night, and he told her he was working, and he was working, and he was working. And finally, his parents clued her in and said, this is not a good man. Even though it's our son, your husband is not working. I don't recommend you stay in this marriage. So she divorced him and then came to the United States.
Gotcha. And then she was in Hollywood. She moved to California. She became an actress. And Emily, we have some at home. If you want, I'll show you. We have some in her scrapbook. We have her scrapbook and some of the, what do you call the playbills, the programs.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that. I'd like to see that as well.
Yeah, it's super cool. We have some old photos of her, and we have some of the playbills and programs of different plays she was in. She may have been in movies. I'm not 100% sure. And there is a picture somewhere, I may have it, of Zadie and her together when she was still alive.
Yeah.
But when she died, Emily, she didn't have any family. She never had any children. So if you don't have a family, what happens is the state that you live in takes ownership of your possessions. And Zadie was literally the only family that she knew of, or that we knew of. And so he got in touch with the state of California, and lots of things came out of that, including the trophy, this rug that we're on right now.
Not this rug. This one we bought in China.
Oh, you bought this one? Okay, I thought this one.
The red rugs I had throughout my house, remember those red Orientals? Those were all, we bought them from the estate.
From the estate, yeah, from the sale. The state of California sold them.
Right. And do you remember in my bedroom I had a green picture that was, that we bought from her estate. I don't know what happened to that picture. I don't know if Carl still has it. Carl had kept some of them. And he was going to sell them. I don't know what happened. That we bought from her estate. We bought all those red carpets from her estate. The trophy we bought from the estate. I'm trying to remember what we bought. Oh, we bought some jewelry of hers. I've never had it appraised, some jade jewelry. And if you want, I can show it to you if I can remember where I put it.
That's the challenge you get old in. You start losing and being forgetful. You losing your memory.
And there was some junk jewelry in there too, which I think I've held on to, but I don't ever wear it. But in China, jade is the most valuable jewelry. Jade is very important, and they keep jade for good luck. That's what they do. So they keep jade for good luck. So everybody in China buy jade. And when I went to China and I was looking at the prices of jade, outrageous. They're just so expensive. And there's so many different layers of qualities, like the different layers of diamonds.
Yeah.
The layers of jade that you can buy are very, very expensive. But everybody, when you see Chinese people, they wear jade. And it's a sign of their wealth. It's a sign of their prominence. Yeah, and so I have some of it. And I should take it in and get it appraised. I don't know if it's any good or not. She came to the United States. She never remarried. She was poor, but because she was so beautiful, men flocked to her. So men supported her all her life. And when Zadie and I went to California, she was in San Francisco where we went. Somehow or other, Uncle Jerry had gotten in touch, either gotten calls from her or something, and he couldn't go visit, neither could Auntie Carol. So Zadie and I went to meet her, And when we mentioned about being Jewish, she brought her current boyfriend there, and she invited us to stay for dinner, and he went out and bought it because she had no money. But when we went to visit her, we mentioned that we may be Jewish, the Jewish heritage, and said, no Jews in my family, because her boyfriend was there, and they had reared her, because of the anti-Semitism in Russia, when she came out, when she didn't come out, but she grew up in Shanghai, they didn't tell her she was Jewish. Or if they told her, they didn't let her know. So I don't know what she knew.
Sure.
But she totally denied it. Later on, she told us, it came out, that Zadie had been married before Bubby. Now, did you know that?
I did know that. I heard that too, yeah.
Yeah, that's when we found
So,
out.
Emily, this is your Zadie's, my dad. His father was married before he married my Bubby, your great-grandmother.
And so when Zadie and I were there, Elena had given us her telephone number, and the digits were reversed. We don't know if it was intentional or not, because it could have been. Meanwhile, we eventually found her, and she was a brilliant businesswoman. She was in her 80s. She was still working. She had started a jewelry business in the States and doing beautifully. She never told her family that she had been married to Zadie, and didn't want us to tell them either. But she had made a success of her life. She had a family. She lived in a gorgeous home in the hills of San Francisco. We went and visited her. She was a lovely, lovely person. But Zadie had done something. They were married for 9 months. He did something that she got very upset about.
I remember.
And she threw him out.
So what happened, Emily? I think my Zadie's Zadie or dad, right? He was like revolting against the Germans or
The
Russia.
Germans had started the war. The Germans had started. Sit up a little bit, please. The Germans. It was the middle of. It was the beginning of World War II in the 30s, and Germany was going into the various countries. Germany was becoming Nazi, anti-Semitic, the whole shebang. And in China, this woman's father was in the not dry goods. What do you call things that are like
Textiles.
Not textiles.
I thought it was
It was
textiles.
like scarves and gloves and those
Textiles.
kinds of things. No. It has another name for it, but I don't remember what it was. But they had, they were selling gloves and hats, and I'll think of it and I'll tell you. But hats and gloves, mostly menswear. And Zadie got very upset when he heard what the Germans were doing, so he went to all their merchandise and he cut it, and he destroyed it. And his wife got very angry, saying, "We've paid for this money. I don't believe in German." Zadie went on a rampage. It was your dad's Zadie. He went on a rampage and he destroyed the merchandise. And she said, "Look, we've paid for this merchandise. We don't have to buy any more, but we have to sell what we have." And she said, "You destroyed what we have. That's not what you do. Out you go." And she threw him out. And so he had an uncle, Uncle Aaron, in Chicago. And he went to Uncle Aaron's. Uncle Aaron made people think that he paid for Jimmy to come. This is James Udler we're talking about, your father Zadie. And he made him seem like he was a good guy. He wasn't. He made Jimmy pay him back for the transportation. And James worked for Uncle Aaron, and Uncle Aaron barely paid him more than 10 or 15 cents a day for what he was doing, but gave him room and board until James couldn't take it anymore, and he ran away and went to Boston.
Room and board means he gave him shelter and food.
Very much like what we saw in that other American painting, where I told you they gave him room and board to the people working in the Civilian Conservation Corps. So that's what they gave. So that's what happened. And then Zadie got to Boston, yours 80, James, gone to Boston, and do you know how he met Frances and how that worked out?
Francis was my bubby.
She was Frances Wolfe, and she was one of 6 children, 5 girls and a boy.
I thought it was like 11 or 12.
No, there were 6 children.
Okay.
Five girls and a boy. Auntie Mary, Auntie Bookie, Uncle Moishi.
Uncle Moishi was the youngest. And
Right.
they had all these girls, and then they had a boy.
They finally had a boy. The 6th child was a boy. I can see the faces of these people. Auntie Uki, Auntie Mary, Frances, somebody that lived in Brookline, not far from them, and I can't remember her name. And there was another gal who I never met, Ida, who was the black sheep of the family, and she wasn't included with anybody. And then there was Moishi. Anyway, Zadie's, James, Francis's father had these 5 girls to marry off. And it's in a poor, it's during the recession, 1930s, early 1940s. He has to marry these girls off. James Udler came to Boston. He was stunning, a very handsome, good-looking man. All the girls wanted him. All the Jewish girls wanted him. And so Francis's father paid Jimmy to marry Frances. And that's how she got her husband. But that was because he needed a husband, and there weren't men around. Men often were now starting to go in the army because 1941 we went into
World War II.
World War II, and the war was brewing in Germany. And so he needed to find a husband. So that's how James became Francis's husband. And the rest is history. Yeah. It's quite a history. James got a job because he was from China. He got a job as an electrician, working for the telephone company. And then when World War II broke out and the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, 1941, he was fired because Americans didn't know, they just knew, Asians, they just knew what we call Orientals. And so James came from China. They fired him because they thought we were in war against Japan. And, so he got fired, and he didn't have a way of earning a living. And eventually his father-in-law had to support them for a long time. Charles was supporting Frances and Jimmy. And eventually they started a washing machine repair. And that's what he did for a livelihood. And Frances ran the business.
Yeah, she was a very smart woman. She would save every single penny they had. And when they went out to a restaurant, they got water to drink because it was free. They didn't get soda. They didn't get Shirley Temples.
Yeah, absolutely.
They wanted to save the money.
They didn't get to order what they wanted.
Yeah. Remember how we've talked about needs and wants in life? You need food. You want a Shirley Temple. You don't need it, right? It's very important, the distinction.
And the way Bubby saved money, Frances Udler saved money, she'd have envelopes. You know what an envelope looks like? She had envelopes, and she would put away 10 cents. This would be to pay the electric bill, and 10 cents would be to pay the gas bill, and 10 cents would go towards the telephone. Whatever her bills were, she kept envelopes. And that's how she would allocate the money to make sure they had enough to pay their bills. And if there was anything left over, then they could go out to eat or do something, but rarely did they have anything left over because James was not making a lot of money. James was not a hard worker. He was very lazy, and Bobby used to have to wake him up every morning and kick him out of bed because he was not a good provider. That's why Charles Wolfe, Francis's father, had to support them because James was not a hard worker. Charles had given them the money to start the business and all that.
It's interesting.
Yeah, but Zadie was lazy. And Zadie fought with everybody. James fought with everybody. So
he wasn't a nice man.
Mm-mm.
And you know what he used to do to your grandfather, Zadie? He would beat him. He would hit him when he messed up. That's what he
never
knew.
why. He never knew why. He'd come home from school, and his father would beat him and then say, "You have to go out working with me." So Zadie didn't have time to do his homework. He was out helping James in the business.
Zadie couldn't wait to get out of that house. So you know what he did when he turned 18? Because that's what's called the age of majority here in the U.S. He joined the military, joined the army. Couldn't wait to get away.
He went to a military college.
I went to a military college. I'm
what
sorry.
happened to him is
Stand
that
corrected.
Zadie was going off to college, and he wasn't a very good student because he didn't have time. He was a C student, and he was wild. He was very wild, and he wasn't accepted by all the guys. He didn't get into the AZA. They blackballed him.
I didn't know that.
They didn't let. He was very wild, and so Francis and Jimmy were trying to figure out what do we do with this kid. He's graduating high school, and so they sent him to a military college called Norwich. And it was an ROTC college, so everybody there went into the military. And so after 4 years of college, then you went into the army.
And Zadie was very, 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 very smart. And you know what they do with the smart people in the military? They put them in a division called intelligence.
And he took, when he was at Norwich, he took one of the hardest courses. He took electrical engineering, which is, of all the engineerings, I think it's the most difficult. And he was smart, but he worked very hard.
He didn't work his tushy off.
He did.
We all have to work hard, Em.
Yeah, he did. He worked very hard. And Bobby and Zadie, James and Francis had to save money. They had envelopes to help pay for the tuition because they didn't have a lot of money.
And then Uncle Jerry, remember him? Remember cousin Jamie and Rebecca and Miriam? They went to their kids' bar mitzvahs. Their dad, he also went into the army, and he was a dentist in the army, and he fixed people's teeth on the battlefield. But this was the Vietnam War. So if you want to fall asleep, looks like you want to fall asleep. It's okay. You can fall asleep. You're cozy.
Yeah, you're getting tired of the story. Yeah, it's hard to sit down for a long time and
For
listen.
22 and a half minutes.
Okay, you can shut it off now. Yeah, it's hard. I spoke to Carl for an hour and 40 minutes.